How about now? Can you hear me? All right. So as I was saying while my microphone was muted, we'll get started. I didn't say much. I just said that how I was going to pin and start the recording. So you haven't missed anything. And also how the recording is being weird. Here we go. Okay, so it seems like it's going now. All right, friends. Get started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the sublime one, the worthy one, the fully self-enlightened one. All right, friends. So we are on our second block. The first talk, we went over kind of like trying to understand the place of the suttas in terms of the whole of the Theravada Pali Canon. We went over, what EBT is, what exactly kind of like the basic definition of the sutta is. This talk is going to be about how these things called suttas came to us. And so the first question is, well, people will say, well, who made the suttas? The suttas started out in an oral tradition. They started out as the Buddha doing his Dhammadutta work, his Dhamma missionary work. Right? So the Buddha left to go on his quest when he was 29. He became awakened about 35. And then until 80, he taught the Dhamma. So about 45 years, thousands upon thousands of teachings that the Buddha gave while he was still in his final body. And so what the suttas are a recording of these teachings. That's what the suttas are. At the time of the Buddha, the way things were remembered and recorded was by oral tradition. So that means that the Buddha would give a teaching, and then the people would remember it. They'd repeat it, keep repeating it until they remember it, memorize it. And then as the teachings, as the community of Buddha's practitioners grew, then they would have whole teams of monks who would be responsible for specific teachings that they would keep repeating together over and over again so that they could remember. In the Vinaya, in the monastic rules, you have the history of the first council. So the first council happened shortly after the Buddha's parinibbana. So the Buddha has become extinguished, and the community of monastics have decided that they need to get together to hear all the teachings from all over the parts of northern India that the Buddha traveled to and taught. So the story in the Vinaya says that they had 500 arahants, 500 awakened beings that came together. And there was one person who was perhaps the most special person for this. That's the Buddha's chief attendant for over 20 years, Ananda. And there's a funny story about Ananda. I said before that the council is only arahants, only awakened beings, 500 arahants. Well, there's a little problem because Ananda wasn't awakened. He had been around the Buddha for so many years. He had heard all the teachings. He actually had, I don't know, what would you call it today, an eidetic memory? Like he remembered all the teachings. There are people today that have, certain memories, certain things in their brain where they can actually remember like stuff that they read from 40 years ago exactly. Right? And to those people, if you ever watch documentaries with them, in many ways, it's more of a curse than a blessing, not being able to forget anything that they've ever experienced, right? So Ananda had this special gift, this special thing that he was able to not only have been there to hear all the teachings, but he was able to remember them. And so at this council, we have Ananda essentially reciting all that he had heard from the Buddha. And when you read a sutta, in the very beginning, it says, "Thus have I heard." That is traditionally attributed to, that's Ananda speaking. Ananda was the one who heard. "Thus have I heard." Buddha was staying at Savatthi, Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. That's Ananda. So the story goes that he was really trying really hard to become awakened, so he wanted to be awakened in time to be a part of the council. And he was really striving. And at one point he was so exhausted and he gave up and he went to lie down. And before his head hit the pillow, he was awakened. It's a good lesson. The more you try to strive and attain, the harder it gets. It's about letting go. Right? That's an important lesson. So Ananda became one of the noble ones, and he was able to repeat this in front of the arahants. And also that which was repeated was the monastic vinaya, the rules. The Abhidhamma was not repeated at this time because it technically didn't exist at this time, at least not in a codified way that it would later become. But so in this first council, we have these teachings being codified. And you can actually see, there's many, many things you can see while reading the suttas that point to this oral tradition. For one thing, you can actually see in the suttas the Buddha or other or disciples referring to other suttas. Multiple times you hear, like the Buddha will say, have you heard the Madhupindika Sutta, right? Which is in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Honeyball Sutta. And you're reading that in another sutta. So you have this kind of, the suttas have this cross connection, these connections that are actually not easy to see unless you actually read like page to page. Like if you read the whole suttas, then you see it. Oh, you start to make connections. You start to see things that you wouldn't see if you were just reading kind of selected suttas being plucked out here and there. When I first met Bhante Sudaso of Empty Cloud, when I first moved to Bhavana to become a monk, he was there. He was technically younger than me as a monk right now. He was like 4 Vasa, I think, when I first met him. And he said something that proved to be correct. I had already started reading all the suttas, but I was not even halfway through yet. So, I mean, it took me like 3 or 4 years to read all the suttas the first time. We're talking about 5,000 pages. If you want to know how many pages the Pali Canon is in total, probably at least double the 5,000 pages of the suttas. It's a lot of pages. And he said that monastics have told him that the Pali Canon is the most internally consistent ancient document in existence. And I heard that, I was like, okay. And then once I read it, I realized, yep, that's pretty accurate. Because when you read across the 5,000 pages, you almost never see one teaching contradicting another. And if you initially think that it's a contradiction, you read another sutta or you learn another tidbit and you realize, oh, it's not a contradiction. When you read the suttas, you see over 5,000 pages. Well, the Buddha talks about this about 800 times. The Buddha talks about this maybe once or twice. And then, scholars look at like, oh, this is added later, right? Or this, we're unsure of what's going on with this. But you'll see, as you get to know the suttas so much, you see, oh, okay, the Buddha's talking about jhana again, just like he has 10,000 times since I started reading the suttas, right? This is how you get to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Now, again, traditionally, the suttas especially are said to be the exact words of the Buddha. I don't know that I can say that. However, I will say that barring any kind of wild Dead Sea Scrolls type find, the suttas are the closest we're ever going to get to the exact words of the Buddha. And when you read them and you see the consistent you start to understand what the Buddha was teaching. I understand this. Because you've heard it over and over and over and over again. It's been repeated maybe many times in the same sutta, let alone the sutta after that and the sutta after that. And so this is where we come to oral tradition. It's a very common misconception that oral tradition is not as accurate as written tradition. Multiple studies have proven this to be false. The error rate in these studies between written and oral tradition is about the same. All right, when you hear that, you say, whoa, okay, that's interesting. Because we have such a bias towards written things. And we don't think about how something that's written down over time, somebody wanted to change something that's written. Nobody's around. Just take this out. If you want to change something that's by oral tradition, you probably have to kill a whole bunch of monks and replace them with other monks that say something different, right? Because the teaching is inside, is in the mind, in the brain. It's very different. And you can see, I remember maybe about 5 or 6 years ago watching a documentary with this anthropologist, and he was talking to, I don't know if it was Swedish or Norwegian, but anyway, it's this gentleman who was one of the only, I think he was literally the only, he was like 90. He was the only person left in the world that knew by heart the sagas maybe some kind of ancient Icelandic sagas or something that was passed down for thousands of years to him. Right? And there was nobody that was going to take it over, right? There's nobody. So basically, all of that knowledge that had been passed down for so long was going to die with him. But one person knew all of that. There are in Buddhist countries today, even still, people. Now, it's not very common, because again, I think it takes one heck of a mind for one person. But there are singular people in the Buddhist world who have memorized the whole canon. So it is quite possible to do this. If you want a great book, I read a couple of years ago, it's called Moonwalking with Einstein. And in this book, it talks about how in the modern day, there are these people who enter into competitions. They practice memorizing things, like memorizing phone books or memorizing such and such, numbers, random things of numbers and things like that. And they compete. And so you see, the author talks about this, but then he also talks about all the different ways that humanity has used memory in the past. And lo and behold, there's a section on Buddhist monks in this book, Moonwalking with Einstein. Right? Because even still, this moonwalking, this is not a Buddhist thing either. As we'll see tomorrow when we get into the history, the Vedas had been memorized, had been orally repeated for 1,000+ years before the time of the Buddha, at least. I remember seeing an archaeological study, or maybe it was what would you call it? An anthropological study that's related to how words are created. And I'm listening to this person speak, and they're saying that some of the syllables that they found in the ancient, oh, by the way, there's still Brahmins in India chanting this stuff today, memorizing this stuff. And so there are syllables and parts of the speech that literally are from prehistory. That's how long these things have been translated, have been kept alive orally. So don't think that oral tradition means worse, right? And what did I say about or where's I go? Okay. The chat thing popped up and it took me off my thing for a second. It'll come back. So let's keep going. So now, how are these all written down? So there is a ancient Sri Lankan text called the Mahavamsa that talks about how Buddhism came to Sri Lanka and in ancient Sri Lankan Buddhist history. And in this text, it shows that about 300 or 400 years after the Buddha, so we're talking about the time right before maybe Julius Caesar was born, right? So we're talking about 1st century BCE. In Sri Lanka, there was all kinds of things. There was wars and famines, and there was worries that there were, the monks were dying off. There was worries that things would be lost. So they took to the task of writing all of the canon up to that point on palm leaves. And of course, one of the sad things is that we don't actually have any of these ancient writings today because of the tropical, warm, humid, temperature and climate of that area. It's not really conducive to those kind of things lasting long. But we do have people over the centuries, over the millennia, who have written them down continuously over and over again. And again, even still, even with that, go back to the point that I forgot, still the Chinese, the Sanskrit, and the Pali are still 95% the same. Even though all of that, still amazing. But this is an important thing to understand. So I wanted to show two things. Let me share a screen here. So this is a little mind map. Those of you who've known me for a while, you know I like to make mind maps and things. And this will be available if you want to use this as like a little handy cheat sheet. I can give this to you. But this is a little mind map I made of the suttas, and the suttas that are part of the early Buddhist texts. So again, I'm not going to read all this out. We don't have time for that, but I'll just go over briefly. Starting with the red. So the suttas are called the Nikayas in Pali, Agamas in the Sanskrit, the Chinese. So Nikaya means a group or a collection. So there's 4 main ones, and then there's a 5th one, but only about half of that 5th one is what we call early texts. The others are added later. So and these are not in order of how they were, this was created first, then that, or anything like that. This is just how it's kind of usually ordered. So the first is the Digha Nikaya. This is the long discourses, and there's 34 discourses in there. And in this selection, you'll see things like the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the last days of the Buddha. You'll see things like the all-embracing net of views, how the Buddha explains, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit briefly during this retreat, how the Buddha explains how people come to have various different views about the world, the universe, etc. And this is also one where the Buddha is quite often proclaiming the perspectives and the teaching of the Dhamma towards other traditions. And then you have what's probably the most commonly talked about one, is the middle length discourses, the Majjhima Nikaya. There's 152 discourses in here, and this is a wide variety of different topics, huge wide variety of different topics. And again, this is like long and middle is only talking about the length of the sutta itself. So like the long discourses, a sutta is going to be about 30 pages. Middle length discourses, sutta is going to be anywhere from 5 to 12 or 13. And again, another wide variety of teachings over there. So in the Majjhima Nikaya, you're going to find things like Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing that I showed you. You're going to find things like Satipatthana Sutta. You're going to find things like the sutta that we're going to go over when we do our guided meditation, the Dvaita Sutta. Right? So you're going to find lots and lots of good stuff in there. Then you have the Sanyutta Nikaya, the yellow, the linked or connected. So if you want to find 100 pages on dependent origination, Samyutta Nikaya is for you. Samyutta Nikaya is grouped into 52 samyuttas, and they are grouped by topic. So if you want, 80 pages on dependent origination, 80 pages on the 5 aggregates, the 5 hindrances, etc., 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 that's where the Samyutta Nikaya comes in the best, the most handy. Very important. Then you have the Anguttara Nikaya. And so you see these little letters here. This is like when somebody gives you a reference, they'll say DN 32, MN 120, Samyutta Nikaya 7.125, right? That's what those are for, so that you can see. And I'll go over that with you probably tomorrow in the last talk. I think we'll go over it. So Anguttara Nikaya is everything that's based on numbers. So books of ones to books of 11s. So if you want to see, like, there's a sutta where the Buddha says there's 4 kinds of persons. Where would I find them? Anguttara Nikaya's book of 4s. I mean, book of 4s is still pretty big. You have to do some searching, but that's how you know, right? And then you have the last one is the Khuddaka Nikaya. Khuddaka means little or small or minor. And here actually is where you have a lot of the most famously known things. The Dhammapada is in the Khuddaka Nikaya. The Sutta Nipata is in the Khuddaka Nikaya. The verses of the elder bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, Taragata and Tarigata, in the Khuddaka Nikaya. Itivutaka, Udana, all these kind of little books that are often seen by themselves, they're all coming from the Khuddaka Nikaya. And this is all what consists of what we call early Buddhist texts. And so if you wanted to say, well, how would I find these things? I'm going to show you a bunch of free ways to find them tomorrow when we go over the various websites. However, they are also available in print. At least the translations by Bhikkhu Bodhi are available in print. So let me share that with you for a brief second. So you type in Buddhist Nikaya. And of course, the first thing that comes up is not the Nikayas, but that's Amazon for you. But then you have, what do we have here? The Middle-length Discourses of the Buddha, a translation of the Majjhima Nikaya, teachings from the Buddha. And that's, of course, Bhikkhu Nanamoli and Bhikkhu Bodhi. So you can see, and they're quite pricey. I remember when I got my 4 set, the 4s. First of all, they're like this all together. They're pretty big. They're big, hardbound books, which is why they're so pricey. But you can get them. You can see them all for free online, if you like. But if you want a hard copy or a digital copy like a Kindle, this is what you would do. You go online, and here's the long discourses of the Buddha, translation of the Digha Nikaya. Now here's the Sutta Nipata. This is here because this is a newer translation from Bhikkhu Bodhi. This is, again, part of the Khuddaka Nikaya. Now here's the connected discourses of the Buddha, Samyutta Nikaya. And we're missing something. Where are we missing? We're missing the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. So these are the 4 things. You can see this this kind of style. Here's a picture of the book. See how nice and thick it is? Like I said, 5,000 pages or so. So let's start to wrap up. See what I wanted to. Okay. So I wanted to, the last section is, so I've gone through all of this information. Then the question goes, well, what good are they to me? Why should I bother reading them? And one of the things I want to read directly from the Digha Nikaya, a paragraph of the importance of these to the Buddha. So, suppose a monk were to say, friends, I heard and received this from the Buddha's own lips. This is the Dhamma. This is the discipline, the Vinaya. This is the master's teaching. The Buddha did not call what he created Buddhism. he called it the Dhamma Vinaya, the teaching and the discipline. So that's why you see here. Then, so this is the Lord's, this is the Dhamma, and this is the discipline. This is the master's teaching. Then, monks, you should neither approve nor disprove of his words. Right? So this is very important. Like you hear lots and lots of teachers and they say something. You say, okay, well, I'm not going to approve or disprove just yet. My job's not done yet. Then, without approving or disproving, his words and the expressions should be carefully noted and compared with the suttas and reviewed in the light of the discipline. If they, on such comparison and review, are found not to conform with the suttas or the discipline, the conclusion must be, assuredly, this is not the word of the Buddha. It has been wrongly understood by this monk, and the matter is to be rejected. But when on such comparison and review, they are found to conform with the suttas or the discipline, the conclusion must be, assuredly, this is the word of the Buddha. It has been rightly understood by this monk. So the Buddha is, again, one of the things I love about the suttas is how practical and pragmatic they are. The Buddha gives us an instruction right there. Whoever it is, whether it's Bhante Jay or the Dalai Lama or anybody in between, whatever they say might be right, might be wrong. I don't know. Let's look in the suttas. All right, let's see how accurate, how close they are to what the suttas say. And when you do that, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Because to be honest, you start to realize how little teachers actually teach, like directly from the suttas. And if you place the suttas in a high regard, that limits who you pay attention to. If you don't, then you listen to a lot of different people, because you can get your teachings in any way from a lot of different ways. And I guess that this should bring up another thing important that I wanted to mention, was that just because what you shouldn't do is I follow the early texts. You don't, the wrong thing to do is to kind of get this attitude. It's like, oh, all these other things, they're so late and they're so wrong and they're so fake. All of these things, Abhidhammas and commentaries, and then even most of the Mahayana things, these are all fake. No, that's wrong. That's not good. That does not help you, actually. What that does is that builds up a kind of, what would you call it, cynical skepticism in your mind, that I know that everything's here. And you close your mind, and you never know what you might learn if your mind is open. So like for me, for instance, I don't spend a second of my day reading any of the Mahayana suttas. But if I speak with a Mahayana monastic and they give me a teaching and I say, oh, that's pretty interesting. Right? My mind is still open to learn from these things. So don't become arrogant if you get into the suttas. Right? That's something I went through years ago. I'm well beyond that now, thankfully. But if you want your guide to be these teachings, then the teachings are the most important thing. It doesn't matter what teacher. You could say, oh, Bhante Jay, I like Bhante Jay, and he's really nice, and he's smiling, and he teaches well, and such. Then you read the suttas, like, God, Bhante Jay knows nothing of what he's talking about whatsoever. Right? You say, oh, well, the suttas. The suttas are the most important thing. The suttas are the teaching. They're the Dhamma. Just as the Buddha, when trying to find somebody more higher than a Buddha, couldn't find anybody. And so he bowed and paid respects to the Dhamma. One who takes the suttas as important as the Buddha gives in that statement always has the suttas as their framework. the suttas as their basis. Let me listen to this teacher. Are they saying something that matches with the suttas? Now, of course, there's stuff open for debate, right? Because Bhante Sudaso and I can say, no, this is in the suttas. No, this is in the suttas, right? And each of us are very certain that this is what the sutta means. And that's part of, the thing. That's why having a multitude of monastic teachers who know the suttas very well, who you can trust, you can get and that's not even just, you can say, well, Bhante Sudaso and Bhante J, they're young. They're not like senior monastics, really. They haven't been studying the suttas for 50 years. Of course, they're not going to know. But Bhante G or Ajahn Brahm or such and such, and then you look up, well, Bhante G says such and such about this sutta. Ajahn Brahm says such and such about this sutta. And they don't match. They're different. What am I supposed to do? Right? And this is something that, you have to deal with. But what I've done in that situation is I have a panel. I have a group of monastics whose interpretations and whose knowledge that I trust. And if I'm reading whatever, I'm reading something in the Samyutta Nikaya about dependent origination, and I'm reading, it's I think I get this, but I need some monastic commentary on it. And I go on YouTube or whatever, and I say, what does Bhante Analio say about this? What does Bhante G say about this? What does Ajahn Brahm say about this? And I see all the perspectives. And then I put it into practice. Because I don't know who's right. I don't know. You put it into practice and you find out. There are things that Bhante G told me to do, and I did them, and they did not my thing. Even though I have so much gratitude for Bhante G. Same thing with Ajahn Brahm. There's teachings. Ajahn Brahm say, oh, you do it this way and this way, and I did it. No, it's not. No, I don't think so. Right? I used to have lots of respect for Ajahn Brahm. It's not about, I have respect for this teacher, so I must do exactly everything that they say. No. Even the Buddha wants us to question, right here. When you hear a teacher, don't say, oh, this is totally right or this is totally wrong. Remember it as well as you can. Compare it with the suttas. Very important in that way. And so what do I mean by the suttas are a framework for study and practice? The Buddha says there's 4 kinds of persons. There's lots of 4 kinds of persons, but this one specific 4 kinds of persons is important to this topic. There's a person who studies but doesn't practice. There's a person who practices but doesn't study. And you can see this very prominently in the Buddhist world today. You can see people, even monastics, they're very learned in the suttas, but they don't study. And you can see the opposite. You can see people who are like, we don't read no stinking books. We're just going to go in the woods and just meditate. Also not good. Right? So the person who studies but doesn't practice, person who practices but doesn't study, the person who neither studies nor practices, I don't know what they're doing, and the person who studies and practices. Even at the time of the Buddha, towards the end of the Buddha's dispensation, you see how the monastics were being broken into a division we see very commonly today. We see the urban study scholar monastics and the practice forest monastics. The Buddha teaches the Dhamma by the middle way, right? Being totally not understanding the teachings and just going to meditate, it's not good. Because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're going to experience. and you might misinterpret what you experience. And then the opposite end, just studying, it's a lot of nice intellectual words you put in your mind. What are you going to do with it? You're not going to get an ounce closer to Nibbana by just studying it. This is why I say the suttas are the framework for both study and practice. You can see in the Digha Nikaya, number 1, the all-embracing net of views, the Buddha explains how somebody meditates and they become a really strong meditator. They get into all kinds of jhanas. And with their strong meditation, they see that somebody was really, really bad in this lifetime, and then they're reborn in heavens. What the heck? Or somebody was really, really good in this lifetime, and they're reborn in hells. What the heck? And they think, well, obviously what you do in life has no meaning whatsoever. Just do whatever you want. And so obviously, if you know the Buddha's teachings, you know that they've only seen part of the truth. Right? They're very good people. If they're not bad people to get to where they've gone, they're very moral people. But they only saw part of the truth. Their meditation experience showed them something, and they didn't understand it fully. So they came away with a wrong view. This is the danger of just meditating without understanding the Buddhist teachings. You don't know, you say, oh, this is just my experience. Okay, well, is it anything close to what the Buddha said? Do you even know? Who knows? Right? This is why it's very important to have that framework. When you read the suttas, the Buddha gives you a framework for your whole practice. This is what happened. This is what you're experiencing. Okay, this is what the Buddha is saying. And so you experience something, you read the suttas, you say, oh, okay. I mean, I was a meditator before the time I became a Buddhist and started reading the suttas. I was a meditator a good 4 years or so. And once I started reading the suttas, like, oh yeah, I know this. The Buddha's talking about it right here. Oh yeah, this is it right here. So the Buddha was explaining it right there for me. And so I matched my own experience to the teachings. And especially when I really started to really get into the suttas, that's when my faith in the Buddha and the teachings just skyrocketed, because the Buddha was like pointing me at it's like my Buddha was like my psychoanalyst and knew everything. It's just like, yep. Right? So this is the importance. This is why this retreat is named Framework for Study and Practice. The Buddha says that you listen to a Dhamma talk. You reflect on the Dhamma talk, and then you put it into practice. That's the cycle. Right? The Dhamma talk gives you some knowledge. It gives you some zeal, some desire to practice. Then you go and practice. This is the importance of the suttas. Right? Even in tradition, even in most of the Buddhist tradition where they don't teach the suttas, there's still this framework of study and practice. But maybe you study the Visuddhimagga instead of the suttas. Right? The very famous, what some people call the Theravadan Bible. Right? The huge treatise by Venerable Buddhaghosa about 1,000 years ago. And so you study that very, very well. So even when people don't study the suttas, there's still the concept of study and practice, because you study to gain the framework. You also study to gain the tools to apply to your practice. So this is why you do this. And I'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but it's important to, okay, I'll bind today. Sure, I'll study. I'm going to get into the suttas, and then I'm totally lost. What am I even supposed to do? Right? That's where I'm going to give you some tips, some tricks and some helpful pointers to help you, get into it a little bit easier, because I know it's not easy to get into. There's a lot of ways that it's not easy to get into. But once you understand the framework, where it's coming from, why it's important, and then you start to read some of the teachings and they connect with you, then you have a firm foundation for a lifelong study and joy of reading the teachings and putting them into practice. So I can see I'm well over time, but I want to get it all in, so it's okay. I do want to just show you very briefly the sutta. We're going to do a very practical, very pragmatic practice during our meditation today. That as soon as I read this sutta, I instantly started putting it into practice. Like, oh, this is amazing. The Buddha's telling us exactly what to do. Easy peasy practice. Let me start doing it. It was amazing. So let me get to the sutta and then I'll share it. Actually, why don't I share it and then I'll go to it with you, so you get more experience in seeing. Okay. So we need to go to the suttas again. We're going to the middle length discourses, the Nikayas, the top one. If you're looking for the Pali, it's always the top one, because then you get into all other kind of things. Going to the first 50. We're going to number 19. Two kinds of thought. And again, I'm not going to read, it's a short sutta, but we don't have time to read it all. But I just want to show you the point so that you connect what I'm going to do in the guided meditation with this sutta. So, bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation. Now, renunciation here is not talking about becoming a monk. It's talking about letting go. Thoughts of letting go of craving. That's what this means. The opposite of the sensual desire. Okay? Thoughts of non-ill will and thoughts of non-cruelty. If you're familiar with the Noble Eightfold Path, you know that this is some sankappo, right thought or right intention. As I abide thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus. So again, this is the Buddha that first you're dividing your thoughts that have come in. A thought arises. Is this skillful and wholesome or unskillful and unwholesome? Is this a thought of letting go, of goodwill, of harmlessness, or a thought of greed, of ill will, of harmfulness? Right? So you're discriminating your thoughts. Unskillful, unwholesome, skillful, wholesome. Right then and there, that's an easy practice to do. Thought arises, boom. What is it? Now, the Buddha says that the Buddha goes again. As I abide thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus. This thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. So you're fully aware that this thought has arisen. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away to nibbana, from nibbana. So you're reflecting, oh, this is an unskillful thought. Thought arises, I hate that person. I wish they were dead. Oh, unskillful thought. And then you reflect, well, what if I kept thinking this thought? What would happen? It would not be for my benefit or for the benefit of the person I keep wishing dead. Right? You reflect on that. And then the Buddha says something very interesting. You can see this in your own practice. When I considered that this led to my own affliction and it subsided in me. So when you reflect on this is not a good thing for me to focus on, to attach to, then it goes away. It subsides. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So unskillful thought arises, you discriminate, you fully understand it, you recognize that this thought will lead to my harm and the harm of others. And as you're doing so, it will most of the time go away on its own. You ever see the suttas where you see where the a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni is meditating and Mara comes and tries to trick them and they say, I see you, Mara? Well, when you see that unskillful thought, you really know it, you see Mara. You say, I see you, Mara. And then it kind of goes away, at least until the next one arises. So very important to see this, right? But then, well, what about, the Buddha says here, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks about and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. Right? Didn't we learn that in school? Whatever you think about a lot, junk in, junk out, these kind of things. So you want to reflect on thoughts of goodwill. So let me see here. Now, just to show you the opposite end, what happens when a thought of goodwill, of letting go comes up. This thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction or to the affliction of others or both. It aids in wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night and a day, I see nothing to fear from it, right? So you see, you're judging, you're discriminating. This is a wonderful thought of metta. Nothing bad can come from this thought. I should practice this, I should feed this thought more, right? So this is the basic practice. So why don't we now start? So again, all of these things, I'll make sure you have the links to all of these things. So don't worry about that now. And if you do have a question, definitely save it for in a couple hours at 6:30 Eastern when we come back for that. All right, so let's do our meditation. Set your body up in a stable and comfortable position. Do a few minutes of scanning through your body like we did this morning. I'm not going to guide that. We already did it extended guided for that. Just do the best of what you can do, remembering, scanning through your body, paying attention to whatever sensations arise, and adjusting your posture if needed so that you can sit for a longer period of time. Remember, if you have trouble, you can prompt yourself by asking, what do I see? What do I feel? And whenever you get done scanning through your body, remember to let the body go, take your 3 deep breaths, and then start following the breath. Remember to lay down your burdens, put down your world. Continue following your breath as I give instructions. Now, this practice given by the Buddha in the sutta we just went over is something that can be done at any time. It's not just for sitting on the cushion. Whenever you are fully aware, thoughts are arising in the mind, you can investigate them, understand them, discriminate between skillful and wholesome thoughts and unskillful, unwholesome thoughts. For the rest of this meditation, as a thought arises, follow the instructions of the Buddha. You get distracted away from the breath for this, or you leave the breath for a brief period, that's okay. During this practice, follow your breath. And if strong thoughts arise, then apply the teachings to those thoughts. Are they thoughts of greed or letting go? Goodwill or ill will? Thoughts of harming or harmlessness? If I keep feeding this thought, will it lead to my benefit and the benefit of others, or my harm and the harm of others? Reflect on these aspects of whatever thoughts that arise. When unskillful thoughts arise, you recognize them as unskillful. See if they fade away on their own, or if they're stronger and don't fade. That's a lesson in the practice as well. Observe that. Try not to give it any energy, any agitation, or excitement. Just observe, just watch. And when the mind calms down, you can return to the breath. Is this thought a thought of letting go or of clinging? thought of ill will or goodwill, thought of harming or not harming. Clearly distinguish, categorize your thoughts in this way. Abandon what is unskillful. Cultivate what is skillful. All right, friends, open your eyes. Come out of the practice. And now we have a break. You might say, well, Bhante, we only sat and meditated for like 35 minutes. Well, guess what? Your meditation's not over. We have a 2-hour period until we come back for Q&A. During that 2-hour period, whatever you're doing, making dinner, doing chores, reading to the kids, whatever, observe when thoughts arise and keep that practice up. Here, let me give you the link for those of you who want a link to the sutta. And Rahul, I will give you I will look for the link to that sutta about the 4 kinds of persons so that you have that. If not today, then definitely by the end of the retreat. However, here is for number 19, 2 kinds of thought. So keep that practice up for the next couple hours. Whatever you're doing, just in addition to whatever you're doing, try to pay attention to the thoughts that are arising. Recognize if they are beneficial or harmful and act accordingly. So in 2 hours, bring your questions. So we have Q&A. So question time, anything, times to talk about various topics about what we've been talking about today. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the topic of the retreat. It could be anything related to Buddhism, monasticism, meditation, etc. So in 2 hours, right now it's 4:30 Eastern, 6:30 Eastern, 2 hours from now, we'll come back and we'll do Q&A before doing the final meditation for the evening. All right. See you in a couple hours, friends.